Thank you, and thank you, Representative Perry, for your service on the Election Law Committee. You did a great job filling it. When I listened to the radio this morning, it talked about how it's Groundhog Day, and that is how we feel about this legislation that is trying to promote a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. Every year we hear about voter fraud. Every year we find that the results of studies and investigations turn it up dry. Somebody who's been following this at the national level and who's quite versed on this is Diallo Brooks from the People for the American Way. Diallo's here with us today to talk a little bit about what they see in the scam that James O'Keefe ran and what they're seeing happening across the nation when there's efforts like this to manipulate public opinion. Diallo.
Thank you, Sandra. First of all, I just want to say we're excited and happy to be here to support this effort to push back against voter suppression here in New Hampshire, and also in voter suppression tactics that are happening around the country. There are a lot of troubling things going on in the American elections right now, but widespread voter fraud is just not one of them. James O'Keefe himself has demonstrated that the major flaw in the hysteria over voter fraud, voter felony, is a felony, and it's punishable and is punished as a felony. It would be extremely difficult to organize a large fraudulent voting operation without getting caught. And when you're caught, the punishment is tough. Under President Bush, the Justice Department tried hard to find evidence of widespread voter fraud in America. The results of a four-year search, 86 convictions out of nearly 200 million votes cast. 86 out of 200 million. And even those 86 people out of the 200 million weren't trying to coordinate massive fraud to steal our elections. Most of them had accidentally voted after misunderstanding the rules. The fact is, you're more likely to be struck and killed by lightning than to commit voter fraud. And if you do, you'll be caught and you'll be punished under the law. James O'Keefe was trying to convince us that voter fraud is common. Instead, he gave us a perfect case study of why people don't try to vote under the names of others. The Attorney General here should show O'Keefe and everyone in New Hampshire that our current federal and state voter protection laws work to prevent and punish those who seek to tamper with the integrity of our elections. If O'Keefe robbed a bank to try to prove how easy it was to rob a bank, he would be prosecuted as a bank robber. The same principle should apply here to the alleged voter fraud. Ultimately, as was explained earlier, this is about much more than O'Keefe. O'Keefe pulled his stunt here in New Hampshire to try to bolster arguments being made in state houses across the country that the only way to stop a handful of people from committing voter fraud is to enact these insane voter ID bills. At a time when big corporations and wealthy individuals and millions of dollars are influencing our election process all over the country, it is important that we make sure that the voting rights remain in the hands of the people. So as a member of People for the American Way, as a staff person there, we're fighting all over the country to make sure that people's right to vote are protected. And in situations like this where voter fraud actually took place, or allegedly took place, there are laws on the books to protect against that. And so there's no reason for us to stand and ask for additional IDs and create a hysteria around voter fraud when it doesn't actually exist. So, as a member of People for the American Way, and as representative of People for the American Way, we're happy to be here to stand up and support these efforts to push back against those that want to come into this state, create this type of hysteria around voter fraud, and make sure that they're called out for that. Like I said before, if you go into a bank and you rob a bank, just to prove that a bank can be robbed, you will be prosecuted for robbing a bank. Same situation here. If you actually go in and pretend to be somebody else and want to vote being somebody else, you should be prosecuted for that. And that's when the actual voter fraud takes place. But normal everyday people don't commit voter fraud, and there is no mass conspiracy here to commit voter fraud. And that should be the message that goes out to the public, that should be the message that goes out to the legislature, and that should be the message that goes to the U.S. Attorney and the Attorney General of the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Diallo, and thank you to each of our speakers. As you've heard, James O'Keefe and Project Veritas have some explaining to do. They need to explain to local Manchester and Nashville residents why they would so callously use the names of recently deceased individuals only days after their families buried them. They need to explain to local poll workers why they would ridicule and minimize the great job those volunteers do. And they need to explain to the state of New Hampshire why they think they are above the very election laws they seek to change, but cannot seem to adhere to themselves. People for the American Way, Daily Kos, and Granite State Progress have joined together to urge the New Hampshire Attorney General and the U.S. Attorney to thoroughly investigate and prosecute James O'Keefe and his cohorts immediately. While we are gravely concerned that James O'Keefe has used tactics of selective video editing and one-sided representations, we're more concerned what a lack of swift response will mean in our community and that of our fellow states. James O'Keefe manufactured voter fraud so that he could sway public opinion and push for laws that will disenfranchise thousands of voters in each state. While the Attorney General's office has indicated they are launching an investigation with the Secretary of State in light of the videos, we are concerned that is not enough. In fact, James O'Keefe and his team have taken that to mean that the AG is investigating voter fraud practices because of their quote-unquote expose of their own manufactured voter fraud. We need to send a strong and swift message that playing political games with our elections is not acceptable in New Hampshire or anywhere else. As one of our members wrote when signing the petition, if this kind of behavior is not stopped, it will escalate. We have strict laws in the books and they should be used to prosecute crimes when and where they occur. Yet in a story that ran in the Concord Monitor this week, James O'Keefe stated, "You'll see us do it again." We call on the New Hampshire Attorney General and the U.S. Attorney to make it perfectly clear that James O'Keefe is not above the law and that his acts of voter fraud will be met with legal action. I have with me today an astonishing 109,931 petitions signed from individuals concerned about preserving the sanctity of our election laws and enforcing those laws when they're violated. We'll be delivering the first round of these signatures to the New Hampshire Attorney General's office this morning, and we'll be following up throughout the week as additional signatures are gathered. We encourage our enforcement officers to heed this public call for accountability and to hold James O'Keefe and his team accountable. Thank you.